So when people have asked me, what's been keeping you busy, Mike? And I've explained that I've been writing a story about my great-grandfather, Robert Patrick Neville, and his family, I've been surprised at the level of interest that people have shown in this. I had been thinking about this just as a book for the interest of my family, but everyone that I've spoken to has displayed considerable interest in aspects of the story. So I thought I'd make a little video about the book, and the book has been published on 27th of October. On 27th of October 1917, Robert Patrick Neville's life was ended by an enemy bomb dropped on the Allied side of the front line near Ypres on the second day of the Second Battle of Passchendaele. As a quartermaster, aged 46, he was engaged in getting hot food to the troops and stabling the horses afterwards. Now, his military career and some of his home life was researched by his granddaughter, Judith Hughes, and she published that research, which had been done, a lot of this with the help of her late husband, Ted Hughes. She published the research in 2014, the 100-year anniversary of the start of the First World War. And initially, I had thought I'd just be working on some little updates for things that I'd discovered, working on those with Judy to provide an update to that booklet. But I found that I was discovering much, much more, and the result is this 200-page book produced with Judy's blessing, but that I've produced based on my own research, drawing heavily actually also on Judy's earlier work. One thing that I found fascinating was just how humble his beginnings were that preceded his distinguished military career. He was born in 1871 in the Ship Street barracks in Dublin, which have been described as the worst military barracks in Europe. His father, Richard Neville, was a private in the Northumberland Fusiliers. Before he was 5 years old, his mother had died. He had two younger brothers, Horace and Sylvester. His father was by then retired disabled from the Northumberland Fusiliers with rheumatism and paralysis, and the family really met some pretty rough times, and they were in and out of the Dublin workhouses for the next few years. One thing, though, that I found particularly interesting was the degree of support from the Hanlon or O'Hanlon family during those years. Julia Hanlon, or O'Hanlon, born Julia Riley, was Robert Patrick Neville's maternal aunt, his mother's sister. And the support by the Hanlons runs like a thread through the subsequent years. In 1876, the workhouse entry for Robert's mother and his younger brother is marked, "In case of death, notice is to be sent to Mr. O'Hanlon at 26 Merchants Quay." In 1880, the two younger boys are marked as leaving the workhouse, but with a comment on one of them going to mother. Now, they weren't going to their mother had died several years earlier, but they were almost certainly going to their aunt, foster mother if you like, Julia O'Hanlon, who was then looking after them. And there are several times where the father is in the workhouse and the boys aren't, and it's almost certain that the O'Hanlon family, Julia and her eldest daughter Catherine, who was Robert Patrick Neville's godmother and cousin, were looking after them. And I've conveyed my thanks to Julia O'Hanlon's great-great-granddaughter, Carol Kane, in Dublin, because without that care for the Neville boys, I might not be here. My grandmother referred to Catherine, Katie, and her younger sister Julia as her Dublin aunts, though they were her father's cousins, not his sisters. I happened to mention to a historian in Dublin that my great-grandfather and his family had lived at 15 Moore Street, Dublin, and Brian, the historian at Kilmainham Jail, said, 15 Moore Street? Your great-grandfather and his family lived at 15 Moore Street? And I said, yes, what's the significance? And he explained that the surrender of the 1916 Easter uprising had been from that address in Moore Street. There is now going to be a national monument there to commemorate the significance of that address. So I have now included a little appendix in the book to show the significance of the Neville's address in the 1880s. Here is the Royal Hibernian Military School building in Phoenix Park in Dublin. It's now a hospital, but this is where Robert and Horace and Sylvester went, and like 50% of the boys who went to that school, they went on to enlist in the army. Robert Patrick Neville joined up as a boy soldier aged 14 in 1885. He went on to serve in India, in Singapore, became an accomplished fighter, and later served in South Africa. But before that, in Singapore, he had married Annie Fox O'Hara, the daughter of James John O'Hara, who was a master tailor in the same regiment, in the Northumberland Fusiliers. One fascinating photograph shows Robert Patrick Neville's wife, Annie O'Hara as she was, together with her mother, Mary, her grandmother, Anna Fox, but who was known as Granny White, White being her married surname, and their child, Robert and Annie's child, Janet, who is my grandmother. This photograph came to me by an interesting route, through Sarah Kempin, who was a DNA match identified via the Ancestry website. Sarah had the photo, and it turns out that Sarah's grandmother, Jane, was kind of fostered by her aunt after Jane's mother had died, and her aunt was Granny White. Sarah sent me various souvenirs from the Far East, probably from Robert or his father-in-law, and these are curated now by various members of my family that I've passed them on to. She also sent Granny White's wedding ring from 1856, and after resizing, that has become the wedding ring for my niece Jen Curran when in 2022 she married Michael Curran. So in South Africa, Robert Patrick Neville served with Colonel Sitwell's Mounted Infantry, and they earned considerable plaudits, medals. Robert was mentioned in Kitchener's dispatches. Sadly, his brothers were both casualties. Horace died, Sylvester suffered permanently affecting injury. Robert was recalled to England in 1902 as a seasoned and experienced veteran to be the instructor for the Northumberland Fusiliers, and they in due course moved to Alnwick. They had 2 children already by the time that they moved to Northumberland, and had 4 more while they were there. As acting Sergeant Major, Robert Patrick Neville set up the new territorial 7th Battalion and earned considerable praise for doing so. There are 1 or 2 family mysteries in all of this, which I have explored, particularly the disappearance in South Africa of James John O'Hara, Robert Patrick Neville's father-in-law. Have I completely solved that puzzle? Well, I've solved one puzzle, but identified another one. So there are a few digressions in the book. If I found something out that I found interesting that's related to the family, then I've included it. So you'll see a few of those if you read the book. Robert Patrick Neville officially retired after 25 years service in 1911, but was re-engaged to be quartermaster and honorary lieutenant, later during the First World War promoted to captain. So there is much more of the story in the book. It was fascinating to research it. I even found the commendation for bravery for Robert in almost his first action in Belgium in 1915. He earned the Military Cross, which was awarded in 1916. The historian Francis Buckley singles him out for a special mention, special tribute appendix in the War History of the Northumberland Fusiliers, and I have reproduced that in this book. I have also put together a map, a historic map of Dublin, with the permission of the Royal Society of Antiquaries of Ireland, but annotated with the significant locations for Robert Patrick Neville's childhood in Dublin, the workhouses, the various addresses where the Hanlons were, and so on, including the house that the Dublin aunts lived in, which my cousin Roger later purchased without any idea that his great-grandfather's cousins had lived there too. Family were, as I say, the main audience that I was thinking of for this book, but friends have shown great interest too in his childhood in Dublin, in the family life, in the military history, and in the process of research that I was able to find out so much, because a lot more has been put online since 2014 when Judith was researching. So if you'd like to see more, have a look on Amazon. I'll put the link in the post, or you can just search Amazon Mike Cashman and you'll find the book. You can read a sample actually by clicking on the link, see the table of contents, some of the early pages, the index, get an idea of the content. You might even wonder why I've got Osama bin Laden and P.G. Wodehouse in the index. For £12.95, you can have the whole book. You choose. Let me know what you think. Thanks, of course, are due to Judith and her late husband Ted for all the research they did, which provided the spark, the structure, the signposts, the sources for what I've done. To my siblings for various contributions, including painstaking proofreading, but above all to my wife Charlotte for proofreading, but also for help with the research in Belgium and in Ireland, and for her tolerance and encouragement that has made the whole thing possible. Do enjoy the book if you get hold of it, and let me know what you think.